And I just want to apologize in advance because that's the thing about working from home is that I have construction work all around my house, all around my flat. So if in the middle of the stream you hear some, you know, um, drilling sound or whatever, that's me. That's not you. But hopefully our content will be interesting enough to keep you guys on the stream despite all those drillings and annoying sound. Here we go. We just have a bump or something. Anyways, hi Frank. Hi, thank you so much for joining. Um, so yeah, this week as it's been more than a week since our last stream. So last episode, we have invited the chairman of Democratic Party of Hong Kong to come on the show to tell us about the mass arrests over the pro-democracy camp's primary election. So more than 50 of them have been arrested. So this week, I want to give you guys kind of like an update, just follow up, and also to touch on a little bit of the COVID situation in Hong Kong, which has been getting a little worse. So first of all, the mass arrest. Last Wednesday, more than 50 pro-democracy activists or former politicians, they have been arrested because of organizing or taking part in a primary election of the pro-democracy camp that was held last July. So most of them have been be released on bail. 1 or 2 days later, there's still one former politician, former lawmaker. He was in jail right now. He's in custody right now. That's because he failed to surrender his BNO passport, which is he was required to surrender all his travel documents, and he failed to do that, so that he broke the bail condition, and that's why the court said, no, you're not getting bail. So he's still in custody, but he's the only one. Oh no, did you not have a picture of me? That is interesting. Maybe it's a... Okay, let me just try launching the studio on my laptop again and see if we can see me. Oh, okay. Is it going on? Right, let me try if I can. Can you see me now? All right, cool. That's great. I guess I'll just turn off my camera on the. How do I do that? I think I just you just see me on my laptop, but I'm actually speaking on my phone. But that is okay. Oh, double audio. Let's see. Oh, there we go. If I mute my computer and the speaker, is it double audio right now? Is it okay right now? I hope it's working now. Yep, okay, there we go. Thanks, guys, for helping me with the technological issues. Don't know why that happened, but I mean, it's technology. That happens, right? So, all right. So yeah, back to the topic. There was one former lawmaker who was denied bail because he's failed to surrender his travel documents. So what's new this week is that so after they have been released on bail, most of them, they have been calling this a political persecution, saying that because it's nothing illegal to hold a primary election just to coordinate within your camp whether, which candidates you'll be sending into an election. So they're saying that, it's perfectly legal. But then, of course, now all these people, they were charged or they're risk of facing charges under the national security law, saying that the primary elections and a lot of the candidates' manifesto is to overthrow the government because they wanted to interrupt the government operation, and when they get a majority in the legislature, then they would be able to, halt operation or stall the budget or whatever. And the central government and the SAR government said that, that is a seditious act, or trying to overthrow the government. So that's what they've been charged with. Sorry, not charged with. That's what they were told. Their intention of having those primary elections. None of them have been officially charged yet. So that's whether they would be charged under national security law. We'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see. But related to this crackdown on the pro-democracy camp, the opposition side in Hong Kong, we have heard about the 12 Hong Kongers case. Now the conviction and the sentences have been announced already. 10 of them are serving their sentences in Shenzhen, and in 2 minors have been sent back to Hong Kong. And recently, just yesterday and the day before, they were sent to court for a court mention, because now that they're back in Hong Kong, they have to face prosecution in Hong Kong for what they have done in the Hong Kong protests. Hi Brett, long time no see. Thank you so much for joining. Frank said, is that having a continuing effect on diminishing the momentum for protests? For sure. I mean, yeah, that could be one of the reasons. Like I said in many streams before, the pandemic is one of the reasons, which I'm going to get into later, about the COVID situation in Hong Kong right now. Another reason is really because of this national security law. A lot of people are scared. Not to mention, just going out to protest, let alone it's shops with like protest posters or with the so-called Lenin Wall. They have been taking those down, or taking stuff down with any protest slogans. Recently, there's a case where a judge in a court, he booted 3 people out, including a lawyer for one of the defendants, because they were wearing a yellow mask with the acronyms of 5 demands, not one less, so FDNOL. So he booted those people out, and one of them were actually the lawyer of one of those defendants. And so that was a very controversial move, and a lot of media, local media, picked that up and published an article or the story on TV, saying that this is very controversial. You shouldn't be, it's just because they're wearing a protest face mask, then you kick them out of the court, But then, of course, the judge later on explained that, because the court is not a platform for making political statements. So that's his ground for kicking those people out, and said that, you can come back if you just put on another mask. And he said that, he explained it was because of the phrase, the acronyms, but not because of the color. So you can still wear a yellow color mask, which, for those who have been following the protests in Hong Kong, you know that yellow is a color associated with the protester, and those opposition would be called blue. So it's sort of like a yellow versus blue, sort of like blue versus red, like the Republican versus Democrats in the US. So that's a similar idea. Would you say Beijing oppression is kind of working in the last couple of months? Well, I think it's a very interesting tactic, and I would say it has a very interesting impact on not only in Hong Kong. I think it's in general, pro-democracy movement in all around the world. It depends on what kind of clamping down, or what kind of oppression, or how large the scale is, or the form it it was done in, it has different effect on the movement, on the social movement. For example, this mass arrest of pro-democracy activists over the primary elections, that was a very pronounced act from the government to basically say that we are to, crack you down. And so with this very obvious move and very pronounced act from the government, certainly it tells people, it's sort of like sending a chilling effect, but then it's also because of such a obvious and pronounced move from the government, it also kind of like anger people. Now, of course, there are a lot of concerns on the protesters' side, it seems, especially when, I talked to some of those pro-democracy activists, and they said that, they're also trying to weave between, gray areas, the national security law, trying to find a space that they could, make their voices heard, protest, but also try not to get into any legal troubles. But of course, one thing that they admitted to me is that it's almost impossible, because they were saying Beijing could basically, charge you with anything or use any excuse to arrest you, to prosecute you. So it's very difficult. It's murky water, but they got to try. That's what they're saying. Is this rippling through generationally? Are young people staying strong, for example? I think in the past year, you really see that the whole social movement in Hong Kong, majority of it has been pushed and propelled by young people. And it's fair to argue that young people in this generation, they have different mindset, and they have different sort of like belief in how to fight for democracy. The older generation, and a lot of, for example, older generation politicians that I've talked to, pro-democracy, they, from my conversation with them, with the younger sort of activists, they have a different mindset, and they have a different set of tactics when it comes to, fighting the government or fighting the authoritarian regime that they called, referring to Beijing. They have a very different set of tactics. So I would say, yes, it's also affecting young people, because and if you see, a lot of those oppression actually targets young people, and in a daily life setting, it's usually young people in society, especially those who say dress in black or have some sort of protests related slogans or little memorabilia in their belongings. Those are the people who are targeted most by police to stop and search, for example. So it's fair to say that it definitely has an effect on young people. But whether you said, is it kind of like diminishing them, their spirit to fight for democracy? We don't know yet, but I would say, like I said, when they have a different tactic, they are not really, unlike the older generations who would take a more, mild approach and trying to like reason with the authorities. Young people in this generation, they don't tend to do that, because what they deem is that the authorities are, you can't really reason with the authority, because in their eyes it's an authoritarian regime, and you can't really reason with an authoritarian regime, because that's not their best at reasoning with you, right? So yeah, I wouldn't say that young people got like really beaten down by a lot of these like crackdowns, no matter by the Hong Kong government or the Beijing government, but Yeah, definitely it has an impact on the social movement for sure. And I was talking about the 12 Hong Kongers case as well. Uh, it was just yesterday, the day before yesterday, um, I think almost a dozen of them, a dozen of people have been arrested over the 12 Hong Kongers case, and they were accused of helping the 12 to flee Hong Kong, and that includes making connections with the Taiwan side because they were those 12 Hong Kongers were they allegedly tried to flee to Taiwan at that time. So the recent arrest for assisting those 12 Hong Kongers. Some of them were accused of providing them money, providing them capital. Some of them were accused of, helping to make connections. Some of them were boat owners who would eventually use their boat to carry or lend their boats to those 12 Hong Kongers so that they could make the move and things like that. And one of them, one of the quite higher profile arrests made was actually a district council in Hong Kong, and he's also a lawyer in Hong Kong. He's a criminal lawyer. He has been doing a lot of defense case for protesters in Hong Kong. He even has opened a restaurant in Taiwan, specifically hiring Hong Kong protesters who have fled to Taiwan or for whatever reason in Taiwan. So he has done quite a lot for protesters in Hong Kong and also overseas. So he was one of those high-profile arrests made these 2 days. Um, and when he was released on bail late last night, he was saying that, I was a lawyer. I'm pretty sure I would not do illegal things because I am a lawyer and I know the law and I wouldn't try to break the law, you know. And so he was really frustrated when he was released on bail. He cried and he said, I really don't know what I've done wrong. And he said that he couldn't figure out why he was arrested. But he said that he's going to continue do what he can do, and what he should do is to help people who have been persecuted. And so he just carried on with his duty, visiting his clients in prison and things like that. Frank asks, is there a coming shift with the post-Trump era? Well, it's not a surprise that this question pop up once in a while in the stream, because we do have a lot of questions about this question, saying that Trump has been taking a very harsh rhetoric against China, very anti-China, very anti-China business and all that, and with a trade row and all that. Would Biden be as harsh or as tough on China? We don't know really, but we do know a lot of Hong Kong people actually wanted Trump to be reelected because of his tough stance on China. But of course now this is not happening for sure. So we don't know how this would carry on. But like I said in many streams before, Hong Kong people are good in, lobbying international allies and whatnot. We have like very prominent figures, for example, Nathan Law and other pro-democracy activists in overseas. So they're not only in the US, but they're in, the UK, Canada, Australia, Germany, and so we're not sure how Hong Kong is going to interact with the US in terms of, helping the social movement in Hong Kong, or, be it sanctioning Hong Kong or Chinese officials. We don't know how this is going to happen with the Biden administration coming in, but there are different countries, there are different international allies that Hong Kong have. So maybe that would be another force to help propel or lift the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement once again. So we're not sure. And it's, the movement has stayed dormant in Hong Kong for quite some time now. So we're not exactly sure how the new Biden administration and how it would, interact with Hong Kong, interact with China. So yeah, it's an uncertainty here, and it's not clear as of now how Hong Kong is reacting to this and how the social movement in Hong Kong is reacting to this, because like I said, it has stayed dormant for quite some while. So yeah, that's something that we are looking at in the future. If I think strict historic authority might somehow be less effective a tactic on the Beijing side. Oh, we are, I mean, we don't know, right? Because if you really look back in history, sometimes harsh authoritarian ruling, it could fire back. Just like in many other countries as well. We have the Spring Arab movement. We have Tunisia, for example. So I think and I would say that China is. I would say it's better than other country in that sense. For example, in controlling a lot of things, and controlling how would I put it? It's not like really just hard on crackdown sometimes. It's sort of like step by step, slowly, a little bit by little bit, so that you don't feel that it's such a sudden and abrupt move. And usually, like I said, from history we know that if it's always like a sudden, a very abrupt move, a very obvious crackdown, it will be pushed back from the people. And so what China has been doing for these years is that it's always a slow push of things. It's always a slow taking over of things. It's not. We don't have internet blackout in China, but we have censorship. So it's that little things that make China a better player in this game, if you will. So, hi, greetings from Sydney, Australia. Thank you for joining this stream. So yeah, I hope that answered your questions. I think it's pretty abrupt. Well, yeah, it's quite obvious, and I think it's because Hong Kong people are really not used to the mainland style of ruling, and so it does come very abrupt for a lot of Hong Kong people, and that's why you see such a big pushback from Hong Kong protesters, Hong Kong people, in the past few years, to the so-called, Chinese or mainland style rulings. To what extent is China Beijing and Beijing China? That is a very interesting question. It sounds like I separate the two conversationally. Is Beijing the government and China the people in the description? Well, in media sense, we always kind of like interchange things. It's just like U.S. and Washington. And yes, when we say, Washington referring to the U.S. government, or, the ruling, the governance of the country. So yeah, when I say Beijing, we mean the Chinese government, the Communist Party, because Beijing is where everything is located, right? It's the central part of the power of the whole country. So yeah, so Beijing is essentially China. And would I say China is Beijing? It's a fine line. I wouldn't know how to define that, but usually when we say Beijing, yes, it does mean China in a general sense. So yeah, similar to the US, Washington. Um, is there stimulus checks in China? Oh, that's a good question. I actually don't think so. I don't think it's at least not given. People are not given like relief checks, um, like how Americans are receiving their stimulus checks. I don't think that's the that's the thing that happened in in China. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I'm not sure if they're getting like stimulus checks, but I would assume, especially with businesses who have to close down and whatnot, they're receiving some sort of government help, um, in one way or another. But so I'm not so sure. Um, what is this thing about Jack Ma? um, I'm not sure actually. I really am not sure. So not sure if he's okay, but according to media report, I guess so. um, so yeah, let's move on to some COVID updates in Hong Kong, and in China in generally. So in Hong Kong, we have seen we're in a fourth wave right now, and hi Lucia, thanks for joining. Um, So yeah, in Hong Kong, we have seen recent surges again, and just yesterday, it was quite horrific, um, because in Hong Kong we have a lot of like old buildings. We have those, we call it walk-ups, which means they are shorter building without uh, lifts or elevators, depending where you are and which term you use. But it's just like stairs. So you have to walk up, say, like 5 floors, six floors to get to your flat. So those buildings are usually just, I would say less than 8 floors because you do have to walk up. So usually it's just like 5, 6 floors, 5, 6 stories building. And recently we have sort of a big outbreak in one of those areas. It's in an older district in Hong Kong. In that district, we have a lot of old buildings, and many of them are poorly maintained. They have poor maintenance um, in terms of building structures, in terms of hygiene condition in the building, in the staircase, in terms of pipe situation. Because we have learned in Hong Kong, pipe and poorly maintained pipes could be one of an infection source for COVID-19. The viruses could spread through, go into your house or go into your, toilets and whatnot, or through your air ventilation van. It could spread the virus rapidly if your pipes are not well maintained. And so in those very old buildings, there have been a recent like outbreak in those areas where a lot of these buildings are very old, and inside we have subdivided units. So it's sort of like condo in the US, but it's even worse because when we talk about condos, it's still, you have your individual toilets, you have your own kitchen and whatnot. The piping systems are like, individually separated. But in Hong Kong, subdivided units, and it's a very common thing. Subdivided units, it's basically you have a proper flat, have a proper size apartment, and then you divided it into smaller rooms. And in many of those cases, you will have to share bathrooms or kitchens or some sort of facilities with other people. And it's a very, very small area. It's probably just enough to put maybe like a bed and maybe a cabinet or a wardrobe, and something like that. So it's really small and cramped. And usually, when poorer households live in those subdivided units, they don't just live, it's not just like a one person flat. It's probably for a family. So many people will be like very cramped in one very small space. And so recently we have this outbreak and it's pretty scary. So the Hong Kong government has ordered basically a whole district, a small district, to undergo mandatory testing. And many of those households have to be sent to quarantine because of that. So yeah, it's quite scary. And yeah, and because the coronavirus is airborne, so the situation, the cramped living situation in Hong Kong is really not helping. But fortunately, most of Hong Kong people were very vigilant in terms of, keeping our personal hygiene, keeping our hands clean, wearing our mask and whatnot. So that helps a little bit. And we also see recent resurgence of the virus in China. We have a couple of days where cases in China have gone over 100 Ks in a day, and that breaks the record of mainland China for quite some time. I think it was since, I think they don't have that many cases for about 10 months, and so recently they have daily cases of more than 100. So yeah, we do also see a resurgence of the coronavirus in China, when the WHO experts are visiting to try to find the origin of this whole pandemic. So yeah. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Just to give a recap on this episode today. You guys, you have so many interesting comments. Yeah, just to give you a recap, so we talked about a follow-up on the mass arrest of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong. Most of them have been released on bail so far. They've been calling it a political persecution. And we have a similar crackdown relating to the 12 Hong Kongers who have been detained in Shenzhen for months. We have recent arrests by the police in Hong Kong, arresting a dozen more people, accusing them of helping those 12 Hong Kongers to flee the city, in terms of, providing money, providing the transportation means, helping to make connections and whatnot. And so that's the latest arrest on, in terms of like pro-democracy figures or activists and whatnot. And we also talked about COVID updates in Hong Kong, as well as in China, in mainland China. We have quite some cases. We're in the fourth wave right now in Hong Kong. And we also see a resurgence of the coronavirus in China. As we're speaking, the WHO experts are in China right now trying to figure out how does this outbreak started and where does it actually originate from. So hopefully we'll get some answers pretty soon. And yeah. There's a comment. What would you say? Did COVID start from China? If yes, from the hospital or the market? Is it natural or man-made? I really don't know. I mean, for sure, the one thing that we know for sure is that the first case, known cases of COVID-19, was spotted in China, in Wuhan. And we really don't know whether that's, from the hospital or the market. We did find, virus samples or traces of the virus in the market. And, with all those, like, I think studies done by like health experts, they're saying that it's probably transferred from bats to human, and it's a wildlife market, so there's a high possibility that it's from the market rather than the hospital. But like I said, I can't be sure, so I'm not sure. I can't give you a definite answer. What is natural and man-made? This is some would say it's conspiracy theory. Some, argue the other way. But we do know that coronavirus exist in wildlife, and there are possibilities that those coronaviruses would be transferred from, wildlife to humans. We've had that, and we also have like public health experts warning that it could happen. It's just a matter of when. I believe Dr. Anthony Fauci also said that, and I remember a documentary or something, or an interview with news media where he said, it's really not a matter of if it will happen. It will. It's a matter of when. So, um, it's we don't know, and we'll just have to leave it to WHO experts and the public health experts worldwide to try to give us an answer. So yeah. Do I worry for my safety being a journalist in China? Technically, I'm in Hong Kong, so still not like mainland China, which it's a little better, I would say. But we do see a lot of more crackdown on the media industry as well, the news industry. Do I worry? I think I still feel okay being a journalist in Hong Kong. But yeah, I mean, there are little worries. I'm not super worried about like my personal safety at this moment. I'm more concerned of the press freedom in Hong Kong. How is it going to develop? Is it going to deteriorate in a couple of years later? So I'm more worried about that rather than my own personal safety. Like, that's a concern, of course, but I'm not super worried about my personal safety as of this moment. Biggie Smalls said, how do the news security laws impact journalism? And do I think Biden will support my freedom? Well, I think a leader of a pro-democracy, a democratic country would definitely support freedom, always. I think that's one of the core values, especially in the U.S. as well. So, and answering another question, how does the security law impact journalism? That is a very heavy question. It does affect journalism. We don't know how exactly it will. There haven't been any like precedents so far since the law has been implemented. Journalists was not being charged or being arrested under the new national security law. So far, none. But if you look at the national security law articles, you would see there are articles that would, for example, regulate the internet. So that, especially the internet, that is only just one example, because especially now, news media, we're using a lot of online platform, the internet, and the internet is how information flows, right? So that one example already could have a huge impact on journalism. And so yeah, I mean but so far we haven't seen any media outlets or journalists being prosecuted under the national security law. But like I said, I mean, there have been journalists arrested just in general for doing investigative journalism in Hong Kong. and or trying to cover the protest, and they were accused of obstructing police officers and whatnot. So you can see that the oppression against press freedom or journalism in general in Hong Kong, it doesn't have to be done under the national security law. It's already a threat, you know. So yeah. Um, Cross species transmission. Oh, you're talking about the virus. Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. So we'll just have to, like I said, wait and see if the experts could give us an answer to that. And, and hopefully by that time we'll have the vaccines and we'll have herd immunity in all around the world, and so that we can just go back to our normal life if we still know what normal is. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really appreciate all your participation and also your comments and questions. Thank you so much for watching In a Nutshell with Almond. Oh, one more question from Frank. What is the general energy lately with the protests? Um, there isn't really much rallies or going on in Hong Kong recently. I think a lot of people are still trying to like push for. That's what I see online. People are trying to push for this so-called yellow economy. So they want people to support to go, like eat at restaurants that support the social movement. Shop at stores that support the social movement and whatnot. Those who call the yellow shops. So I guess that's one thing that they could do. You know, not so fearful of the retribution under the national security law. So that's the main trend that I'm seeing in terms of the protest. But yeah, in terms of like physical protest, there isn't really much going on in Hong Kong right now. Hope that answered your questions. So yeah, thank you so much for all the questions and comments. Really, really appreciate your participation. And so definitely follow me, subscribe me on Habs, and you can follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Give me a follow and subscribe me, and sponsor me if you like my journalism. I would really appreciate your support. And this is In a Nutshell with Almond. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.